Chapter 234, First Day as Squad Leader 1. Chaos greeted me at the reception of the guild. It was filled with all sorts of people, but looking around, it seemed to be filled mainly with journalists. Again, why are they here? I was a little confused by the sight of them. I had assumed that everything would return to normal after the press conference, but I had grossly underestimated the chaos that unfolded after the section chief's words. Hello there. Suddenly, I was greeted by a reporter. She had short black hair, pearly red lips, evidently from the lipstick she put on, and had a fairly decent face. She brought her phone in my direction. Are you a part of the guild? Any comments on the current situation? Do you know anyone in the containment department? No. I felt like shooting myself in the head. To those who knew me, they knew that I hated people. However, if there was one thing that I hated even more, it was talking to strangers. Reporters were included. It just made me feel like shit. Oh, yes, I'm the janitor. The woman blinked, and so did I. Janitor? Why did I even say that? Really, are you really the janitor? The woman looked at me suspiciously, and I nodded. I'm not lying. I took out a pair of keys and showed them to her. These are the keys to my office. My office had previously been a janitor room. It was the place where people placed all of their nonsense. The keys that I had still had the tag that said storage closet. Oh, that really does seem to be the case. The woman quickly lost interest from that point and turned around. I was just about to prepare to slip away when she turned around and looked at me. I froze. What, did she not believe my words? Don't tell me. Here. The woman suddenly presented me with a small card. This is my card. If you do have anything interesting to share, then you can call me. Pushing the card onto me, she left right after that. I could only stand there numbly for a few seconds before looking at the card in my possession. Elizabeth Smith, Malavia Times. Junior interviewer. I could only stare at it at a complete loss before shaking my head and putting it away. I thought about tossing it, but then decided against it. There might be a time when this might come useful. And with that, I managed to force my way towards the elevators before finally reaching the containment department. The place was doing a lot better than the reception. But it was still a lot more chaotic than usual. I looked around but couldn't find any of the usual people that I knew. They're probably doing some sort of mission. This wasn't surprising. It had been a bit since we had returned from the previous mission. It was now time they all got back to work. The same went for me as I went back to the office and dropped my stuff before coming out and going back to the elevators and going to the -2 floor. Ding! As soon as the elevator doors slid open, I stepped into a long corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly into the distance. The walls were stark white, and a dull grey carpet muffled my footsteps. Lining both sides were identical white doors, perfectly spaced, each marked with a number centered neatly on its surface. The entire hallway felt abandoned, the overhead fluorescent lights flickering faintly, casting soft, intermittent glows. A strange stillness hung in the air. Glancing down at my phone, I began walking, my footsteps sinking lightly into the carpet. The silence pressed in from all sides, wrapping around me like a shroud. An uneasy feeling crept over me as I finally stopped in front of a particular door. Room 507, it should be this one. Reaching out for the doorknob, I pulled the door open. Clank! Whatever noise had lingered just moments before suddenly faded, and several pairs of eyes turned toward me. I met their gazes briefly, then let my eyes wander across the room. Another office. The place looked like a small office space with several cubicles scattered around. At the end of the room was a single desk with a metal plaque. Looking at it, my face paused. Seth Thorne. I guess that's mine. I was a bit taken aback by the layout, but I didn't show it as I finally paid attention to the others in the room. I was already familiar with Joanna, Min, and Mia. They had been the ones I had been paying more attention to during the training session. I was less familiar with the other three. Sarah, Neil, and Nora. I scanned the room and paused my gaze on them. Neil was on the shorter side, with square-framed glasses, light brown hair, and sharp blue eyes. It was hard to spot him at first since he was partially hidden behind the cubicle, but he was rather loud with his keyboard. He seemed to be busy writing something. I then shifted my attention to the other two. Nora was also on the shorter side, with unremarkable features and black hair tied into twin tails. The most unique feature about her was the freckles on her face. Lastly, there was Sarah. Where was she? I looked around the room. However, regardless of how I looked, I couldn't find her at all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were only 5 people in the room. Am I missing something? Where is? Are you looking for Sarah? Yes. I looked at the one who had just spoken. With her long silver hair and decent features, I recognized her immediately. She should be Joanna. I felt a mix of feelings while looking at her. I had every profile. I was aware of the fact that she was the one with the most experience here. Unlike me, she had spent about 3 years in another guild. In terms of experience, there was no one else in the room who had more than her. If someone had to be the squad leader, then it had to be her. The fact that I had been selected instead was the most confusing thing about this entire situation. Nonetheless, since the decision was made, nobody could really do anything about it. That is, unless I quit or ask for a demotion, but I doubt they'll give it to me. I could only secretly sigh while looking at Joanna. She stared at me with her intense eyes. And then, she's not feeling well. She isn't. Does she have the flu? Or? It's nothing like that. Joanna waved her hand. Nothing like that, then. I'm not sure, but it's really weird. In what way? Joanna paused before lowering her head. She's been a bit off ever since the training session, right after playing the game. I paused. Game? Wait. My heart skipped a beat. Don't tell me. Ever since the training session, she's just been feeling off. I tried asking her what was going on, but she just wouldn't speak at all. It's weird. I stood in silence, starting to speak, but the words caught, and I closed my mouth again. Shit. This is because of my game, isn't it? I was a little surprised by this development. As far as I was aware, Sarah was a top recruit from a regional academy. She was decently ranked and was supposed to be a highly promising recruit. For her to be affected by the game, is something actually wrong with her, and it has nothing to do with the game and I'm overthinking, or is it really related to the game? I wasn't entirely sure, but I planned on finding out more later. It's really strange, Joanna muttered while pinching her chin. She's been acting a little off since that day. I can't quite explain it. Do you possibly think it's because of the game? As she asked me the question, I shook my head. I'm not sure. The situation told me that it was. However, my gut told me that there was more to it. I see. Joanna looked a little dissatisfied with the answer, but didn't probe any further, and just as she moved away, the room's door opened and the section chief came in. Looks like everyone is here. He looked to be in a better mood. It looks like Seth is also here. Perfect. He was just about to clap his hands in satisfaction when he paused and looked towards a certain cubicle. Oh, wait. Sarah is missing. Without missing a beat, Joanna pointed out Sarah's absence to the section chief. Sarah? He pursed his lips and looked at me. I told him what Joanna told me. She apparently isn't feeling well. His brows furrowed, but he didn't say anything after that. I guess that's fine. Today, you're not going to be diving into any gates. It'll be more of an introduction to the gate system and what you're going to be doing. I felt a little relieved hearing this. I wasn't quite ready to enter a gate or anything like that. I also didn't know what I was supposed to do and was fairly ignorant of how the entire system worked. Seth, follow me. Walking towards the desk by the end of the room, the section chief motioned me with his hand before sitting down on the chair and booting up the computer. It was also then that I noticed the computer, and I paused. Can that even be considered a computer? It looked like a massive white brick block. It resembled something that came in the early 90s. I'll give you a general rundown on what you're supposed to do. Once the computer finished booting up with a series of whirs and beeps, the screen flickered to life, casting a dim green glow across the white desk. Thick lines of text blinked against the monochrome background, and a blinking cursor waited in the corner. The interface was bare bones. No icons, no windows, just rows of blocky, pixelated letters. What sort of fossils were they using here? Don't judge the computer because of its appearance. With his eyes flickering green due to the monitor in front of him, and as though he could sense the shift in my thoughts, the section chief smiled before moving the cursor. This right here is probably one of the most advanced pieces of technology that we have in the guild. Click. Even the sound of the mouse felt odd. However, it was also then that I saw changes occur on the screen as several texts appeared. Play button gate 0. Null arch. Infinite path. Silent march. The Moor of Passage. Each name blinked in unison as the pixels on the screen refreshed continuously. Pausing the cursor over the first name, the section chief looked at me. Press enter on any of them, and you'll be able to directly bring everyone in the room into the respective gate. My brows couldn't help but jump up upon hearing the words. Then, shifting my attention back to the computer, I pressed my lips together. So you're telling me that I can directly enter gates and bring everyone in the room with just the computer? The section chief pressed his finger against the monitor screen. One more thing, each gate is classified by level, starting from the lowest rank, F, up to the highest, S. When choosing a gate, you'll first need to select the rank before seeing any available options. The classification gives a general sense of the gate's difficulty. For example, an F-rank gate typically only requires individuals from the first order, with higher ranks demanding progressively stronger participants. Pausing, the section chief gave me a knowing look. Not that it actually matters, this is just a general safety guideline. I see. I still found it hard to believe that someone with no powers or order could actually clear a high-ranking gate, but I was the living proof of it. With the right items and preparations, I guess it truly is possible. Okay, now that I'm done giving you a general rundown of the situation here, I'll address everyone within the room. The section chief raised his head and looked at everyone present in the room. All of you here will be a squad. Your squad name is 507, the same as the number on your door. You will all be under team leader Soren, and your main job will be to enter gates and collect fragments. The section chief stood up from the chair and sat down at the table while crossing his arms and scanning the room. I'm sure all of you are aware of how things work around the guild. However, I'll still give a quick introduction to refresh your mind. He's just saying it for me, isn't he? Gates provide fragments, we want fragments. We clear the gates, we earn fragments. The higher the clearing, the purer the fragment. We like that, we want that, we repeat that, we call it farming. Visible question marks popped up on the heads of everyone present. The same was for me as I looked at the section chief. What sort of way of talking was this? No, thinking about his personality, he's probably speaking like this just to save time. I pinched the middle of my brows as I continued to listen to the section chief speak. Each gate has limited fragments. The higher the ranked gate, the more we can farm, and that's pretty much it. Oh wait, right, each gate also differs with each dive, just a little bit. The section chief smiled, looking extremely satisfied with himself. The only thing I felt was a headache. However, I more or less understood what he was trying to say. In essence, our job is to go to gates and farm fragments. The gate rank doesn't really matter in terms of the fragment level, but we can earn more fragments from them. Each gate differs slightly with each dive, and the better we do, the purer the fragment. It was pretty straightforward to some extent. There will be a quota that you'll need to meet by the end of each month, and for each fragment that you earn, depending on the purity level, you'll be assigned GP, which stands for guild points. You'll be able to use the points to buy items provided by the guild. My heart sped up in that moment. This was exactly what I had been looking for. You can access the shop directly from the computers before you. There's detailed information on all of them. I looked at the computer and felt my body itch. I really wanted to get right onto it. But, Seth, the section chief's voice shook me out of my thoughts as I lowered my head to look at him. My expression tensed when I saw his serious expression. I'd like a word with you outside. Clanged. The door of the office slammed shut, and I stood outside with the section chief. Why am I outside here? What does he need? Why does he look so serious? Did something happen? Did they decide not to agree with the previous deal? All sorts of thoughts crossed my mind as I stood outside with the section chief. I stood in silence without saying a word, waiting for him to say something. Each second of silence felt like they were dragging for an eternity. And then, there are a few things that I'd like to talk to you about. The section chief finally opened his mouth to speak. I quietly nodded my head. First things first, you've probably noticed a mob outside of the guild, correct? I have. I couldn't forget it, even if I wanted. In short, we paid a lot of people and bots to review your game positively. The news of it got leaked. Huh? My face froze. They did what? But more importantly, who leaked it? We were the ones who leaked it. The section chief followed up as though it were the most obvious answer. While we do want the people to understand that the game is scary and that we aren't lying, we also want to maintain an advantage against the other guilds. If my guess is not wrong, many of the guild's higher-ups will have tried your game. Most of them will dismiss the game after trying it. For some reason, your game works only after a certain threshold. MHM. Yes, this I knew. By getting the news to leak that we paid people to give the game positive reviews, we're trying to get the other guilds to not realize the true potential of the game. Of course, this might not work for every guild, or might not work at all, but it'll at least delay things. And coupled with the advantage our games have, we should be able to build a sizable gap with the other guilds in a few years. And I see. The section chief's explanation made sense. I could see why he'd want to do it. I wasn't exactly losing out in this, since the money from all the purchases was going to me. However, what I was worried about was the potential hit to my reputation. I might not suffer that much, but the guild will definitely suffer a hit from this. The section chief and guild master were probably aware of this, and yet still chose to go through with it. This showed just how committed they were to the entire ordeal. It's also true that they might not be able to fully make the other guilds realize the potential of the game, since the lower recruits may try it out of curiosity and eventually spread the news, but this might delay the entire thing. This was a price the guild master and section chief were willing to pay. Setting the bad news to the side, I've got good news. As the section chief's face relaxed, he handed me a small paper. This is a check for the money that we are willing to invest in your next game. We already talked about the terms before, but we've changed things up. Huh? I looked at the number on the paper and nearly forgot how to breathe. I'm not seeing this wrong, am I? You're not. The section chief chuckled. $3 million. But was this way too little? No, of course it's not little. However, it's nowhere near the amount of money that I need in order to develop a VR game. This is. Don't worry. The section chief placed his hand over my shoulder. This is just the money that we'll be giving you to develop the game. Regarding your virtual reality requirements, we've already contacted several large suppliers and other studios. We're discussing terms with them. The $3 million is in addition to that. Hello. I finally felt my breath return. Alongside it, my heart also started to leap inside my chest. If it's really true, then this is massive. My games will definitely reach a whole new level. But with that being said, the learning curve for this was going to be incredibly hard. Just thinking about it made me feel anxious. That's all regarding the investments. There's one last thing that I want to talk to you about. Yes, there's more. What else could he want to talk about? Talk. He tapped his knuckle against the side of the wall before looking at me. The recruits that are under you are all excellent. None of them is prideful, and while they may not be the best of the best, they all have high potential. The reason why I chose you to be the squad leader is that I think you'll be able to lead them well. The section chief pinched his chin. I'm not sure why, but I just think you'll do well. I'm not so sure about that. How was it that the section chief had more confidence in me than I had in myself? I trust my judgment, and I'm never usually wrong about this stuff, but with that being said, the section chief's face turned serious. I can only protect you so much. Team leader Soren isn't as nice as I am. If she does not deem you good enough, then expect her to kick you out of your position. Is that clear? Yes. This was only fair. Good. A satisfied smile marred the section chief's face as he patted me on the shoulder. He then looked behind him before patting me on the shoulder. That's all from me. I'll be going back to the lower floors. Tomorrow will be your first true day as squad leader. Take some time to decide which gate to enter and study it well. Oh. As if recalling something, he snapped his fingers. You should also go check up on your missing member. As the squad leader, it's your job to make sure that she's doing fine. Me, but... What? You're going to tell me that you're not good at this stuff? How did he know? The section chief gave me a knowing smile. Did you forget your original position in the guild? Trauma Cown, oh. That's right. With a laugh, the section chief patted me on the shoulder. It's time for you to do your job. I still didn't fully believe that Sarah got traumatized because of my game. However, the section chief wasn't wrong about me needing to check up on her due to my role. And as such, I followed up on his advice and went to the dorms to meet Sarah. This should be the room, right? I looked at the door and then back at my phone. Making sure it was the right one, I knocked on the door. To talk. Sarah, are you in there? Later. No answer. It was quiet. I frowned. Was she not inside? I paused for a moment, then pressed my ear to the door, straining to catch any sound from inside. But just as I did, something tapped my shoulder. I turned, and it felt like my soul nearly left my body. A ghost. Her long hair fell over her face like a curtain, but it did nothing to hide the ghostly paleness of her skin or the stark white dress she wore. The instant I saw her, my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. You are. Even her voice was creepy. It was hoarse, almost brittle. Later. Seeing that I wasn't answering, the ghost tilted her head, only to make herself look even creepier. Thankfully, I was quick to recover as I looked at the door behind me. Are you Sarah? Oh, yes. Sarah slowly raised a hand to her face, gently parting her hair to reveal deep brown eyes and thin, red lips. There was no denying that she was quite beautiful, but she really did look too much like a ghost. Oh, it also looked like she recognized me. You must be the squad leader. It looks like you've been filled in. Oh, yes. Her large eyes blinked before she turned her attention towards the door behind me. As if getting her message, I took a step to the side as she took out her keys and opened the door, revealing her room. It was relatively tidy, not much different from mine. Upon entering, she paused by the counter near the door, quietly pouring hot water into a small cup before dropping in a tea bag. She then looked at me. Would you like one? No, I'm okay. No. She brought the cup to her lip before flinching. Hot, and yet, she still brought her lips down. Hot. It was a baffling sight, but I quickly dismissed it as I directly asked her about her situation. I've been told that you're sick. What did you get? Is it a cold? At the same time I asked her, I raised my hand to show the small plastic bag that I was carrying. There's some medicine and snacks inside if you need them. I thou. It's not a cold. Sarah shook her head while putting the teacup down. My breath paused. Could this really be because of my game? I'm not really sure why. It happened after I played the weird game. Was it that scary? It was scary, yes, but not scary enough to make me sick. It's something else. So it's not the game. I paused and frowned. If it's not the game, then what can it be? This doesn't seem like a symptom of fractures as well, so then. Maybe you're on your period. Oh, that coup! I suddenly paused, feeling my entire body freeze as a head popped up beside me and rested on my shoulder. With her short black hair and sharp eyes, she appeared from out of nowhere as I nearly had a heart attack. However, the moment I caught sight of her face, I instantly knew who she was. Team leader. Oh, it looks like you recognize me. Team leader Soren brought her chin away from my shoulder as she looked at Sarah. She placed her hand over her chin. Are you usually this pale? You look like a ghost. So you say it too. As expected of a team leader. Her eyes were sharp. The MHM. The team leader stepped closer to Sarah and gently placed a hand on her forehead. She nodded a couple of times, then turned her gaze toward me. This is tough. Is it serious? No. Then, I have no idea what she has. She's even worse than the section chief. Are you maybe related to the section chief? No, why? Never mind. Right. Everyone in this guild was a lunatic. How could I forget that? I'm surprised you'd think I'm related to the section chief. The two of us look nothing alike. But you both are certainly not mentally sane in the mind. Either way, even though I don't know what she has, it's not a big problem. Here, open your mouth. Taking out what looked like a pill, she hovered it above Sarah's face, startling her. However, before she could even voice out an objection, the team leader grabbed her chin, prompting Sarah to let out a surprised yelp before tossing the pill into her mouth. Make sure to swallow. Patting her hands in satisfaction, the team leader looked at me. What? I gave up, staring at Sarah, whose face turned even paler. I just decided to turn a blind eye. I saw nothing, wasn't present, and I heard nothing. Don't worry about her, she'll be fine. The pill I gave her should heal her real quick. In any case, I actually came here for you. I froze. She came for me. Oh no. I tried to take a step back, but she stopped me before I could leave. I heard that you're the new squad leader under my command, and that you don't have powers too. This is great, very good. The more she looked at me, the more satisfied she seemed. A smile marred her pretty features. Enough to blind the common man. However, I was no common man. I could see the devil hiding behind that smile. That's why I took a step back. Or tried to. With both her hands over my shoulders, she stopped me in place. Dinner on you, okay? I feel like I'm forgetting something important. Kyle muttered while staring at the computer in front of him. Several options were presented before him as he dragged the cursor down and selected House of Mist. He raised his head and looked ahead. Is everyone ready? 5 other people were in the room, each seated in their own cubicle, all with their eyes fixed on Kyle. They were all about to dive into a gate. Just to double-check, do you all have the summary of the gate information? Do you have the necessary items? Things may change in there, so you'd better have all the necessary equipment. While I can do my best to help all of you, if something goes wrong, don't expect me to save your life. Just like Seth, Kyle was also a squad leader. His squad was a lot more developed and experienced than Seth's. But it wasn't long ago since he had been put through a similar situation to Seth. Nobody is saying anything. Okay, I'll take it that all of you are ready. Turning his attention towards his computer, Kyle pressed the enter key. Immediately, a loud whirring sound erupted from the machine, its fans spinning up rapidly. The room around him began to flicker, phasing in and out. As if the office around them was merely a wallpaper, hiding the reality that hid behind it. Despite the distortion, none of the other people in the office seemed to notice. Kyle glanced around, his gaze drifting, until something clicked in his memory. Oh right, today's Seth's first day as squad leader, isn't it? He clearly remembered when Seth first told him about the promotion. Kyle had been firmly against it, but convincing Seth once his mind was made up was always a losing battle. The cubicles around him dissolved completely, and the floor beneath his feet began to transform. The once familiar grey carpet shimmered, then reshaped itself into creaking, time-worn wooden planks. A musty, mouldy smell seeped into the air, making Kyle's nose involuntarily scrunch up. As the transformation continued, he let out a sigh. He's going to end up buying her dinner, isn't he? Shaking his head with a mix of pity and amusement, Kyle slowly looked up at his surroundings. The sterile office was gone. In its place stood an old, abandoned house. His desk was gone, and all that was left were the items in his hand. Looking around, memories of the past stirred. He thought about the dinner he had had with the team leader in the past and smiled. I feel like puking. Huh? What? Squad leader. I'll text you the location later. In any case, good luck tomorrow with your first gate. I want to hear all about it after you're done. Even after hours had passed, team leader Soren's voice still echoed inside my mind. She was like a storm. She came and went, leaving nothing but confusion and chaos behind. I still recalled the lost and confused look on Sarah's face as the team leader left. In that moment, she seemed to have even forgotten that she was sick. Well, I guess this ended up being a good thing. Shaking my head, I looked at the table in front of me. There were several documents scattered about. This is a bit troublesome. There are quite a few interesting ones. There were a number of scenarios in front of me. I was meant to select one for tomorrow's first gate excursion, and I was currently torn on a couple of things. First, I was unsure of the level of the gate that I wanted to select. And secondly, I was unsure of what type of scenario to choose. There were quite a lot of interesting scenarios in front of me. Each one looked difficult, and while there were instructions on how to clear each scenario, I knew that each gate would end up differing slightly from the previous. Let's not even forget to take into account that my luck is incredibly bad. I was suddenly reminded of the first gate that I had entered. From the news that I had managed to read about the incident, the level of the gate had actually been higher than what it was supposed to be. The same thing happened the second time I had entered a gate. Miles Gate. This made me think. Is it possible that whatever gate I enter, the difficulty increases? If this were truly true, then things would be extremely troublesome. This would mean that I'd have to select a lower-ranked gate. This was probably going to earn me some judgment from my own team, but if my hypothesis was correct, then I had no choice. I needed to account for it and run the test. And even if it turns out to be wrong, I can always say I just wanted to get to know the team better. Either way, there wasn't much they could do for now. Okay, this is good. With my thoughts finally clear, I began sifting through the various scenarios. The desk lamp cast a sharp light over the papers as I leaned in, studying each one with care. Time slipped by unnoticed, and it wasn't until I stumbled upon something promising that I realized just how late it had gotten. Oh shit. I checked the time and groaned. It was way later than I intended it to be. But it's all good in the end. I tapped into the scenario and nodded. This will be the one that we'll go to tomorrow. I'll give them a rundown of it tomorrow morning. With everything set and ready, I put everything back and headed to bed. I needed to be as well rested as possible. I couldn't make the same mistake as in the past. Tomorrow was going to be a long day. 8 a.m. Room 507. The recruits all showed up on time. Joanna was the first one to come as she turned on the lights in the room and got ready for today's excursion. Following her were Mia, Min, Nora, Neil, and lastly Sarah. Hey, a ghost. It was a scream from Mia that made everyone aware of her presence. When did you get behind me? Mia took several steps back, hugging herself tightly, revealing Sarah standing just behind her, hair limp, head tilted in confusion. I've always been here. Ah, goosebumps, I'm getting goosebumps. Mia revealed her hand and showed the hair that was rising from it. Joanna stared at Mia's arm before giving her a weird look. If you're scared this easily, you shouldn't be in this line of work. That's what I said. Mia nodded in agreement, prompting several question marks to appear on the heads of several people. Joanna opened her mouth but soon closed it. Maybe she was forced by her family, who knows? She never intended to get too close to the others. In this line of work, forming attachments was a mistake, almost a sin. Very few teams made it through without casualties. Most suffered heavy losses, and growing too close only made it harder when the inevitable happened. A certain wall and distance needed to be kept in order to protect oneself. As such, ignoring Mia, Joanna addressed Sarah. When did you get here? Not too long ago. I see, are you feeling better? Yes. Good. Joanna smiled before looking away and heading for her desk. As she did, she brushed her silver hair behind her ear as she looked around. Is the squad leader still not here yet? We've yet to receive word about the upcoming gate. I wonder about that. Neil commented from his seat as he took out his glasses and cleaned them. Maybe he's taking so long because he doesn't know which gate to choose. From what I've heard, he doesn't seem very experienced at this. In fact, from the rumors I've heard, he has almost little to no experience and has never graduated from an academy. The room turned silent after that. Besides Sarah and Mia, everyone else in the room was aware of the rumors. Naturally, as their squad leader, they were all curious about him. The only thing they knew about him was that he was part of the people who had been present during their game sessions. This made them a little bit curious about him. As such, they all did their own little digging about him. Since they were going to entrust their lives to him, this was only natural. And yet, what they managed to find through the rumors left them completely baffled. Not only did he have little to no experience, and had never graduated from an academy, but he had only been at the guild for less than half a year. This piece of information left them all completely stunned. But that was still fine. They trusted the guild's judgment, especially after the game experience. There's also another rumor that I've heard. As Neil spoke up, everyone's gaze turned towards him again. He looked around carefully before lowering his voice. Apparently, he's very close to one of the stars of the department, and used his identity to pressure one of the members into giving up his credit. Thankfully, the guild was sensible enough to see that there was no way for him to have done anything and dismissed him. However, he's apparently a snake, and we have to be careful of him as he might try to steal our achievements. The atmosphere in the room turned tense in that moment. Everyone looked in the direction of the door with some apprehension, Joanna in particular, as she looked at Neil. "Where did you hear this rumor from?" "That." Neil made a troubled look before shaking his head. "I'm not supposed to say." "But..." Clank. Before Joanna could speak, the door swung open and the man in question stepped inside. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, and though his hair was slightly tousled, he appeared well-groomed. His features were undeniably handsome, but what stood out most were his eyes. Something about them felt unsettling. As his eyes scanned the room, some of the members unknowingly tensed, and as Seth slowly settled down on his desk, he placed a couple of files on top. "I've decided on the scenario that we will be exploring." He pointed at one of the files. "The Devil's Hunt. This will be the scenario that we'll be exploring." I could see the shock and surprise in the faces of the members the moment I announced the scenario. I had already been prepared for it the day prior. "Wait, squad leader, isn't this scenario a little too low in terms of rank? All of us here have been trained for quite some time. And we've long reached the stage where we can do gates above the F rank, don't you? This isn't about the difficulty of the gate." I cut off Joanna while shaking my head and looking at the other members present. "This gate here is to better determine the skill of all of you present, and to get to know all of you better. The same goes for all of you with each other. Take this as a learning opportunity to build some synergy between each other." I had been thinking about the perfect excuse to have them accept the scenario. In the end, I went with the most obvious excuse, and seeing how quiet everyone became, I could tell that this ended up being the correct choice. I looked around in satisfaction. "I've sent all of you a link on your mails. Please check it out and give the scenario a proper study. Alongside the file are the things that are required for the upcoming excursion. I've already placed an order. You can all collect it later once you've read the applicated." I tilted my watch and checked the time. "We have about 2 hours until the excursion. You can spend the time doing your research, and if you think there are other items that you need for the upcoming excursion, feel free to tell me. I'll see what I can do." Each squad leader was given a budget for each excursion. The budget mainly depended on the gate that we planned on entering. The higher the gate, the higher the budget. Even so, the lower gate received a good budget. My budget consisted of 5,000 GP. For a team of 7, this was a rather acceptable budget. There were quite a few things that I could buy with it. What's crazy to me is how the guild points almost have a similar purchasing power to the SB that the system uses. This makes things a lot easier for me to understand. Taking out my laptop, I opened the guild's database, which I now had access to, and looked through all the numerous items that were available for purchase and loan. The loan aspect was the one thing that intrigued me the most and made me most excited for the guild's shop. While the items might not be as crazy as the ones from the system, I can already see a couple that can be extremely useful for me. From a cloak that could hide my presence to a doll that could detect nearby anomalies, there were a lot of intriguing items. The unfortunate thing was that all the intriguing items were extremely expensive, and most of them were already loaned out to someone. But of all the things that had intrigued me, there was one in particular that grabbed my interest. Devil's Book. A cursed tome that grants instant knowledge of any subject upon reading. The effect lasts for 30 minutes. Beware, prolonged use may invite whispers from an unknown entity. Warning, extremely dangerous, use with caution. Consumable. Price, 245,500 GP. On loan. This was undoubtedly the item I had been searching for. At the very least, it seemed like the most useful tool I could have when the time came to settle my bet with the conductor. However, there were two major problems. 1. The price. It was incredibly expensive, so much so that any thought of purchasing it was out the window. Secondly, and the most troublesome thing, was the fact that it was also loaned out. The most annoying aspect was the fact that it didn't tell me to whom it was loaned. Damn it, maybe I should ask the section chief later. I was quite desperate to get this item. I felt that this would be one of the keys to helping me solve the bet. But it was far from perfect. I needed more than this. How annoying. Ruffling my hair, I looked at the time. My eyes jumped up in surprise. I had been so absorbed in looking through the shop that I didn't realize that it was almost time for the excursion. Looking at the other members and seeing that they were all ready and looking at me, I coughed. It looks like all of you are ready. They all just nodded their heads slowly. For some reason, their reactions felt rather cold. Did I do something wrong, or is it because they know more about me? It was most likely the latter, but as far as I was aware, the section chief said that these people weren't very prideful, for them to look at me with this coldness. Oh well, I shrugged. This didn't particularly matter to me as I booted up the main PC. Right after that, I was presented with a few options as I clicked onto the F-ranked gate sections and selected the Devil's Hunt option. The moment I did, I glanced at the members one last time before pressing Enter. The PC responded with a sudden loud whirring as its fans spun up rapidly. The room around me began to flicker, phasing in and out of reality. I had a difficult time processing the change around me. I was simply too shocked to properly react. Flick. The fluorescent lights above buzzed violently before cutting out altogether, leaving me in near-complete darkness, save for the glow of the monitor, which pulsed red like a slow heartbeat. A sharp metallic scent filled my nostrils, something between rust and dried blood, and the faint aroma of damp stone followed close behind. The floor beneath my feet groaned, warping and shifting into cold, uneven cobblestones. Walls that once held posters and cables peeled away like wet paper, revealing crumbling stone bricks. The air grew heavy, thick with mildew and the stench of rot, as if something had long since died in the walls. Clank, clank. Chains clinked faintly in the distance, swaying from above. A chill crept up my spine as a low wind whistled through cracked arrow slits high above, carrying a subtle whistling sound. The monitor before me fizzled out, replaced by a flickering torch lodged in a rusted iron sconce on the wall beside me. Its dim flame cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to move in even rhythms. Then, somewhere behind me, I could hear the slow, deliberate creak of a door opening, and as I slowly turned my head, I caught sight of a long, spiraling flight of stairs that seemed to lead toward the unknown. The office was long gone, and we were now within the confines of what appeared to be an old, middle-aged castle. Just me. The others were gone. I took a deep breath, trying my best to remain calm. But right as I did, ding! A notification appeared right before me. The scenario is now starting. Operation The Devil's Hunt. Class black. 7 wooden boards, 7 empty rooms. One harbors a cursed soul, desperate to escape. Each may ask but one question. Find the haunted before it finds you or become one of its victims. You have 66 minutes. When time runs out, you'll find yourself becoming part of the board. Scenario candidates will be joining shortly. Do you wish to purchase any item? From the moment the scenario begins, you won't be able to purchase items. You have 60 seconds. I stared at the notification in front of me with a blank expression. 1 minute, what do you mean I have 1 minute? This had never happened to me before. While I wasn't flustered, I was still surprised. Nonetheless, I quickly snapped out of it and frowned. This makes the situation more troublesome. I had purposely saved up my points in order to spend them at the gate. However, it seemed like this was no longer an option. I frowned before thinking about all the items that were available in the shop. Unlike the past, I was quite aware of the scenario of the gate. Looking around the room, my gaze settled on a small wooden table resting in the center. An unlit candle sat beside it, its wax cold and cracked from years of neglect. Next to the candle lay a weathered wooden board etched with strange runes and letters. It looked no different than a Ouija board. No, that's exactly what it is. The room was empty besides me. The other members were all in similar rooms. The goal of the mission was simple. It was to use the board to ask questions and figure out who the possessed was. The main issue was that we all had one question each, and the only questions we could ask were yes or no questions. Furthermore, the possessed could make the board lie once. At the same time, the possessed could hunt the others and turn them into possessed to hunt the others. There was a time limit of 66 minutes, and in that time, if the prime possessed wasn't found, then the gate would fail and we'd all be stuck here. This wasn't supposed to be a hard challenge, considering how we had a direct list of questions we could ask to figure out the possessed. However, I understood that things were probably not going to be this simple. There's a good chance that the possessed can lie more than once. This was the main issue. If it could lie more than once, then it would make the entire situation more difficult to solve. I pursed my lips and sorted through all the available items in the shop. In the end, I decided to buy one item. Salt of the Sacred Rite. Pure white salt with an unusual crystalline pattern. Sprinkling it around a door or window creates a temporary ward that blocks spirits once. Beware, ineffective after one use. Consumable. Price 12,000 GP. Puff. A small bag appeared from above me as I caught it. Immediately after that, notifications appeared on my screen again. The time limit is up. The shop is now closed. Best of luck. Luck my ass. I shook my head before looking at the small bags in my hand. Opening up and seeing the salt in it, I looked at it before closing the bag again. This should be able to save me once. I wanted to buy more, but it was only useful once. Okay, I think I'm ready. I turned my attention towards the wooden table and the flickering candle. The candle was a sort of timestamp. The moment it completely burned out was the moment that the time was up. At the same time as I moved to the table, I opened up the salt bag and scattered it around me. I also put some near the door. There was just enough that it could cover the entrance, too. This should be able to guarantee that I won't be the affected one. Taking off my bag, I retrieved a small walkie-talkie. I pressed on the communication. I'm ready. Is everyone ready? I waited for the next couple of minutes before I received messages from the others. Yes, I am here. I am also ready. I'm inside a weird room. We are all in rooms. I am also ready. Me too. And mate Chem. Seeing that all 6 members were ready, I nodded and took a deep breath, mentally prepping myself for the upcoming scenario. If there was one thing that I noticed while entering the scenario as opposed to the times in the past, it was the fact that I wasn't as scared as I expected myself to be. This wasn't even because of the weird side effects that I had been experiencing. It really did seem that after everything that I had gone through, my tolerance for horror had increased. I honestly didn't expect this, but this is good. Clearing my throat, I brought the walkie-talkie to my mouth. Okay, light up the candle next to you. The moment you do, the scenario will begin. Most of you are already aware of what will happen, so proceed as planned. If something out of the ordinary happens or you notice anything, report it immediately. My words were met with silence, but the silence was confirmation to me that they had all heard. Start. Taking out a lighter, I lit up the candle. A faint flicker manifested the moment I did, and the atmosphere changed. Suddenly, the torches that were around the room turned off, and the door that had been opened slammed shut. Bang! I didn't flinch and kept my expression firm as the surroundings seemed to shift. The shadows formed by the candles seemed to stretch around me, almost as if they had turned into invisible hands that were trying to grasp me. Certain whispers that I couldn't quite make out lingered in the air for the next several seconds until... Silence. The room turned incredibly silent. I pressed on the walkie-talkie. Is everyone done? Zonk, 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 zonk. My words were met with silence. I opened my mouth and asked again. Is anyone? But, yet again I was met with silence. It was at this moment that my heart slowly sank as I closed my eyes and put the walkie-talkie down. As expected, things are never easy when I'm participating. The scenario. It had, without a doubt, already changed. This was something that I had expected, and as such, I wasn't very flustered. This was also something that we had already discussed in advance. We had already taken into account the possibility of the walkie-talkies not working. As such, staring at the candle, I slowly turned my attention towards the board and placed my hand over the planchette. I waited like this for the next several minutes until a change occurred. SCP-inspired. I felt a cold touch over my hand as the planchette moved on its own. The candle next to me flickered violently as the planchette continued to move, and the room plunged into a state of coldness. Then, is the possessed a female? A soft voice whispered in the air. The voice was cold, but it was recognizable. It was Joanna's voice. Holding my breath, the pointer stopped at no. I wasn't relieved by the answer. The possessed could lie. Thankfully, we had already planned this in advance. The flame danced again, shadows crawling as the cold deepened. My hand, nearly numb now, returned the planchette to its starting point. Is the possessed a female? Another voice. Min. The pointer moved once more. Yes. I froze and felt a noticeable shift in the air. One yes, one no. It suddenly became clear. One of the two was lying. And just as if that wasn't enough. KH. A sudden static sound came out from the walkie-talkies. Slowly turning my attention towards them, the walkie-talkies started working again. Wasn't this a little too coincidental? The walkie-talkies are working again. It works for me too. Hearing the voices coming from the walkie-talkies, I didn't speak. Something about the situation felt off. This felt like too much of a coincidence. It appears that the suspect is either Joanna or Min. A voice suddenly spoke through the walkie-talkie. I recognized the voice. It was Neil's voice. The moment after he spoke, the walkie-talkie fell silent. Nobody said a word. And this alone felt surprising. Joanna and Min are not saying anything. That was unless the walkie-talkies for the two aren't working. Sarah's voice whispered into the walkie-talkies. I took a deep breath. This makes things quite a bit more difficult. I took this chance to speak. There's no guarantee that they are the culprit. The possessed can lie. This could be a chance to pin the entire situation on either one of the two. That is true, but won't it be easy to tell who is lying if we just have two more people ask the same question? About that, I didn't really know how to answer this. Realistically speaking, this was the correct route. If two more people asked the same question, we'd all be able to pinpoint the possessed since one of the two was lying. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that the possessed had the ability to lie more than once. Should we proceed like this? Hearing Neil's words, I still remained uncertain. All logic said that I was being paranoid. However, my guts were telling me otherwise. Even if I'm wrong, it's never wrong to be cautious. The only issue is whether they'll choose to trust me. No, it didn't even matter if they didn't trust me. I was the squad leader. What I said went. Picking up the walkie-talkie, I shook my head. No, not yet. What, but? There's a good chance that this might be a trick. I need more time to analyze the situation. What, but it's already obvious that one of them has lied, since it can only lie once if we. But what if it can lie twice? The line fell silent after my words. The silence persisted for several seconds until Mia's voice echoed. Lied twice, but this has never happened before, why would? This is always something that you need to take into account. We all know that not all gates are the same upon entering. There will be subtle changes that make them a little bit more difficult to clear. In that sense, we need to take into account the possibility that the possessed can lie more than once. I thought that this was a good explanation. At the very least, I thought I'd be able to buy myself some time with it. However, that's ridiculous. Neil didn't seem to be on the same page as me. I've read through all of the backlogs of this gate. There have been over a couple of thousand excursions, and within each excursion, there's never been a time when the possessed could lie. With a certain pause, I felt the tone in Neil's voice change. Squad leader, do you perhaps have another motive in mind, or are you the possessed one? The line paused after that. Despite being so far apart, I could feel the coldness in his voice. Although the others remained silent, I could also feel that they felt the same way. I stared at the walkie-talkie in my hand, without much of an expression. What a troublesome situation. At the rate things were progressing, I could see the team ignoring my orders. I couldn't remain stubborn. Even if I did choose to go the path of the tyrant, they'd most likely ignore me. What do I do? I tapped the back of the walkie-talkie a couple of times before eventually relenting. All right, do as you please. Although I didn't want to do this, I knew that my assumptions were groundless. There was a good chance that I was being paranoid and that the possessed really couldn't lie. If it ended up being that I was right, it still wouldn't be too late. We're proc. KHHH. A static sound came out from the walkie-talkie in the midst of Neil's words. The shadows danced as the flame of the candle flickered, and I turned my attention towards the board once more. I pressed my hand over the planchette and waited. Then, is the possessed a girl? Mia's voice whispered in the air. Her voice was soft, but the moment it sounded, it almost felt as though a cold wind had blown past my ear. I then felt a cold touch over my hand as the planchette started moving once again. It continued to move until it came to a stop. Yes, I silently groaned at the sight. Yes, in that case the possessed was Joanna. She was the only one who said no, and since the possessed could only lie once, she was the most obvious candidate. But was that really the case? No, this is far too obvious. KHH. The walkie-talkies worked again. It looks like we have our candidate. Let's vote for Joanna. Neil's voice echoed from the walkie-talkie. I'm in favor. Yes. There was a pause after that. So Mia is not responding. Then, squad leader, what is your decision? This is too easy. I replied. I will vote if you wish me to vote, but this is far too easy. Do you really think the possessed will lie like this? The records show that it has happened a couple of times. This is also a low-ranked gate. You're thinking too much. I'm casting my vote. Same. Me too. The others all cast their votes, and I secretly shook my head. I hope they're right. I really did. All right then. I decided to vote for Joanna as well. Reluctantly, I reached forward and placed my hand on the planchette. The board was cold beneath my fingers. I began to guide the pointer, each letter scraping against the wooden surface. All I had to do was spell her name on the board to eliminate her. All of us had to vote at the same time in order to cast someone out. However, if someone did manage to catch a glimpse of the possessed, they had the ability to vote them out directly without the need of the others. But this was only applicable if they actually saw the possessed, and the possessed saw them. J-O-I-S-N-N. With every push, it felt as though something pushed back, not violently, but it seemed to resist. Whispers trickled in at the edge of my mind as I pushed the planchette. I clenched my jaw and blocked them out, forcing the planchette to complete the name. As the last letter clicked into place, the air snapped. Everything stilled. The temperature dropped sharply, like the room had been plunged into an ice bath. The candle's flame danced wildly, casting distorted shadows that leapt across the walls and ceiling. Then, rattle, rattle. The table shook violently beneath my hands. The board rattled as if it might fling itself into the air. I instinctively grabbed the candle, holding it steady, letting the planchette clatter free. Clank! The door behind me burst open with a deafening slam, banging against the wall before slamming shut again with unnatural force. The shadows around the room warped and twisted, stretching like they were being pulled by invisible strings. The air grew thick. thick enough where it felt suffocating. I stayed still, eyes wide, muscles tense. And then, silence. Everything stopped, the tremors, the voices, even the pressure in the air seemed to pause. Only the candle flickered, its once bright flame now dimmed considerably. It had burned halfway down, wax pooling beneath it like melted time. I stared at the board, waiting, the silence pressing in from all sides. And then it moved. The planchette began to slide, a low scraping sound echoing within the silence. It glided across the board, as though guided by an invisible hand. Each inch felt like a minute, the weight in the room thickened, clinging to my skin like oil. And finally, the planchette stopped. No, the word escaped before I could stop it. The cold worsened, slicing into me like needles. The atmosphere shifted, and my expression tightened. I was right. I had been right all along. The possessed. It could lie more than once. If there had been any lingering doubts before, this was no longer the case. This gate had evolved. How is this possible? Neil's voice echoed from the walkie-talkie. I could see the confusion in his voice. This doesn't make sense. It lied once already. We should have been able to solve the scenario. But it didn't. Mia's voice followed right after that. It seemed like her walkie-talkie was working again. Is the possessed one Neil? As Sarah's voice echoed, everyone turned quiet. It would make sense. He's been pushing to vote for Joanna since the start. Nora said, her voice sounding somewhat aggressive. Her words were followed by a subtle sound coming from Min. HM. No, wait, I only pushed for Joanna because it seemed like the most logical conclusion. You all agreed with me. But you were so firm about it. You even disagreed with the squad leader's commands. You did too. Chaos was starting to ensue in the communication channels. I wanted to shake my head and speak over them, but I decided not to. This was probably necessary for them. The team was new, and there was no synergy between them. They all probably were elites coming from academies, and despite not looking like they had egos, it was clear that they all had their own pride. This was a good way for them to experience failure. More than that, I need to think about the situation more. Joanna was clearly not the liar. This much was clear. At the same time, two other people had spoken, Min and Mia. Realistically speaking, the two were now the prime suspects. It should only be one of the two. The issue was that I now needed to understand who it was between the two. It wouldn't be difficult to figure this one out. Min is a boy and Mia is a girl. If everyone asks the same question, we'll figure out the answer immediately. This sounded easy in principle, however, I was still worried. There was no way things would actually be this simple. I still nonetheless reached for the walkie-talkie and pressed the communication button. Everyone, please calm down. I think I know how to solve this problem. I lowered the walkie-talkie right after that. But, why are you blaming me? Aren't you the number one suspect? You were clearly the one pushing the situation the most. Like I said, I was only following logic. The fact that you're arguing against me shows me that you might be the possessed one. See, you're shifting blame to me. The channels remained a mess. None of them seemed to have heard my words as they argued against each other in the communication channels. I frowned and tried to speak again. This time I raised my voice. Settle down. But the result was still the same. HM. It was here that I understood that the situation was not as simple as it seemed. Is my walkie-talkie not working? I flipped it to the other side and checked the batteries before speaking again. However, the result remained the same. You're arguing against logic. You're clearly stirring things up. It's me, May. Stop, both of you. Mia is right. No, I agree with Neil. In fact, the chaos seemed to grow even more prominent. It got to a point where I realized that something was wrong. These were top recruits. Even if they disagreed with each other, they should all still be able to calm down and think things carefully. The answer was right before their eyes. Unless the possessed had unknowingly possessed a few others. I thought for a moment. There were short intervals when the walkie-talkies didn't talk. Was that a coincidence? Obviously not. In that case, could the possessed one have taken over the minds of a few members in the meantime? Is it trying to sow discord between the members to delay time? I looked at my walkie-talkie. Each time the walkie-talkie stopped working, the possessed could attack. Everyone's walkie-talkies were working. Everyone but mine. My head snapped toward the door. It was open. Pitch black. The hallway beyond looked like it had been swallowed whole by something, the shadows almost pulsing at the edges. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat as I grabbed my knife and crept toward the doorway, each step heavier than the last. I stopped just short of crossing the threshold. The air was colder here. I clenched the knife so tightly my fingers ached, eyes locked on the shifting dark ahead. You can do it, you can do it, you can do it. I forced myself to push past the fear and broke into a sprint, lunging through the doorway with my knife slashing to the right. But, swoosh, I hit nothing. I hastily looked to my left, but also found nothing. Just the long flight of stairs stretching into the dark and the small, empty space around me. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. I pursed my lips, trying to steady my thoughts. Maybe I was overthinking. However, just as I turned back to my room, my eyes fell on the small line of salt on the floor, and my breath paused. There I saw the outline of a footprint, one that seemed to have stayed for quite some time before leaving. I held onto the knife with even more force. The possessed one was here. Whoever it was, they tried to attack me but stopped because of the salt. I felt chills running down my spine just thinking about it. The fact that I hadn't noticed until now made the hair on my body stand as I looked back at the board. The walkie-talkie was still going crazy with the other members blamming each other. This was clearly the work of the possessed. What should I do? My first line of thought was to go back and try to wait for the walkie-talkie to work again. However, that didn't seem like the best plan, especially since there was no guarantee that it would work. In that case, I shifted my focus back to the footprints on the floor, then looked toward the stairs. In the darkness, I finally noticed them, faint salt prints trailing upward, barely visible but unmistakably there. I bit my lips and looked back, towards the room that seemed to be the safest place in the entire place. I wanted nothing more than to stay there. However, I knew that I couldn't do that. I looked back at the footprints and took a deep breath before holding the knife in front of me. I shouldn't delay things any further. If I follow the footprints, I should be able to find the possessed one. Without any more delay, I decided to climb the stairs. Tap, tap. As I ascended the staircase, the rhythmic thud of my footsteps echoed through the spiral, each step ringing louder than the last. The walls seemed to draw closer with every turn, the space around me tightening. The light faded as I moved away from the candle, but I pulled out a flashlight to make up for it. Its beam cut through the dark, revealing dust particles drifting silently in the air. Beyond the pounding of my heart, I could hear the sound of my own breath, amplified in the silence. I kept my eyes ahead, climbing step after step, up a staircase that felt like it stretched into eternity. I continued to climb up until I eventually came to a stop before an old wooden door. The salt traces stopped there. Bringing my shoulder near the door, I slowly pushed the door while holding onto my knife. Creak. A low creaking sound echoed in the silence as I held my breath. The darkness clung to the beam from the lamp as the door fully opened, revealing a long and deserted corridor. It was also there that I saw it. The faint outline of a figure standing at the very end of the corridor. I froze for a moment. But then, I clenched my teeth and gave chase. I honestly couldn't believe myself. I was the last person who would even think of giving chase to something that was even remotely dangerous. And yet, here I was, running straight toward the very thing that terrified me. The thing I should have run from. Stop. Clinging onto the knife in my hand, I rushed with all my might towards the shadow. It was just unfortunate that the distance between us didn't shrink despite my running at full speed. Fuck, I only just started to go to the gym, cut me some slack. Just a little run was enough to make my lungs burn. My speed was also on the low side. This situation secretly reinforced my thoughts of keeping up with my gym schedule. Stop. The beam of my flashlight bobbed wildly as I ran, its light bouncing across the uneven, rotten cobblestone beneath my feet. Along the walls, faded paintings flashed in and out of view, dozens of faces, all pale and staring at me. I tried my best to ignore them, as I kept my gaze firmly locked onto the shadow in the distance. I couldn't allow it to run away from me. K8. I ignored the burning in my lungs and pushed myself faster. At the same time, a black film began to spread from my legs, reinforcing them as my speed steadily increased. Knowing that this entire situation was being recorded, I made sure to keep the action extremely subtle. Thump thump. Each of my steps started to echo louder within the corridor. I could feel that I was slowly catching up on the shadow. It was just as I was getting close enough to determine their identity that the shadow flickered and disappeared from view. Huh. I stared at the scene, stunned. Where did they go? I moved closer to the spot where they left, and paused the moment I noticed a wooden door. My breath paused as I looked at the door. From beneath the door, a faint, flickering light pulsed irregularly, like a candle struggling to stay lit. The air around it felt colder. It felt dangerous. And yet, swallowing my saliva, I did the one thing I would never have done in the past. Bang! I kicked the door. Heilig! A scream followed as a figure huddled back, nearly toppling the desk over. She just barely managed to keep everything from falling over as Mia appeared before me. She stood frozen, her face ghost pale, eyes wide with panic. Strands of her brown hair clung to her damp forehead, and her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. Squad leader. Her voice came in tremors. I frowned while looking at her. The shadow disappeared right here, and she's one of the two people that I previously suspected. Is this a coincidence? I didn't think so. Taking a step forward, I saw Mia's face pale even further as she took a step back. Squad leader, what are you doing? Why are you getting closer? And why? Why are you holding onto a knife? Don't tell me. I could see her eyes darting towards the walkie-talkie on the desk. She probably wanted to communicate with the others and tell them that I had been possessed. However, I was more preoccupied with something else. The lamp is almost out. There are only a few minutes left. I had to end things quickly before it'd be too late. I took another step forward. Mia's face paled even further. Her eyes trembled, and as I stopped before her, she huddled to herself as if she was too terrified to look at me in the eye. Squad L later, please. I ignored her words and raised the knife. Then, swoosh, I swung. Heliac now. A scream followed. Clank. A loud metallic clang echoed as my knife struck something solid, and then a large figure emerged in front of me just as I swung behind. The impact's recoil knocked me back several steps, while Min stood completely still, unmoving. Mia lunged at me a moment later, but I quickly dodged to the side and backed away. That's when I saw her standing next to Min. There was surprise in her voice as she looked at me, eyes wide with something between confusion and disbelief. How did you know this was a trap? I didn't answer immediately before lowering my head and staring at Min's shoes. As expected. Min, what should we do now? We've caught the spirit, should we warn? How did I know? You were too obvious. I looked at Mia. You of all people should know. I'm just a regular person, I said, my voice calm but firm. You look too afraid of me, something that shouldn't make any sense at all given your knowledge of me. I paused, then turned toward Min, narrowing my eyes. Besides, I pointed at his shoes. I left a line of salt at the entrance to my room, a simple trick to see if anyone tried to enter. My gaze lowered toward Min's shoes and the faint marks of salt left behind by them. Look at his shoes, they've got traces of salt. His shoe size also told me that it wasn't possible for you to be the same person that I was chasing. I realized in that moment that Min was the one that I was chasing. But with that being said, even though I was certain that it was Min, I knew that even if I went back to the board and put out his name, it wouldn't work. The rules stated that I had to be truly certain. Mia lowered her head, her eyes settling on Min's shoes. That's when she noticed it too, the faint traces of salt clinging to the soles. That's. Don't listen to him, this salt comes from another room. I smiled. If I had to guess what happened, Min suddenly rushed into the room and told you that I was chasing him with a knife and that I was the culprit. His story would make sense if not for the fact that the culprit can only be either one of you. Mia's face changed. How? But then she paused and fell into a brief moment of thought. It was there that she seemed to finally connect the dots. Confusion turned to dread as her gaze snapped toward Min. The atmosphere changed instantly. The air grew colder, heavier. The candle flickered violently, its flame sputtering as if reacting to something sinister. A chill swept across the room. Min's expression began to twist, slowly, unnaturally. His features warped into something that wasn't entirely his as his eyes started to turn pitch black. And in that moment, a sharp, bone-deep cold crawled down my spine. Quickly use the board. How's me? Mia looked confused, but after seeing my expression, she immediately dashed towards the board and reached for the planchette. The candle was now almost entirely melted, and the flame was extremely dim. The surroundings were dark, and the walkie-talkie was only emitting static sounds. Rattle, rattle. The surroundings shook as I stared at the hulking figure before me. This. I could hear Mia's voice behind me as she struggled to move the planchette, but my focus had shifted. Min's face had twisted into something sinister, and without warning, he lunged in her direction. Stop her, I must stop her, stop. Stop her, I must stop her, stop. Stop her, I must stop her, stop. His voice took on a strange, layered quality as he spoke, but before he could advance, a black liquid coiled around his legs. I swung my foot with all my strength, kicking toward him. Bang! My foot came into contact with his body, and he skidded back. As he did, his attention turned towards me, his pitch-black eyes locked onto me, and I felt every hair on my body rise. I tried to laugh, but I couldn't. Suddenly, I really am starting to miss puking. Clank! NN! A loud, muffled shout echoed behind Mia, causing her to flinch briefly, but she quickly turned her focus back to the planchette, doing her best to move it. Why is it so hard to move? Despite her best attempts, it was as if something was preventing her from moving the planchette. The candle before her flickered violently, casting frantic shadows across the walls as the room began to tremble. Come on, come on, come on. Her thoughts screamed in her head, desperation clawing at her mind. Her breath grew shallow, her pulse pounded in her ears, every muscle in her body was tight with urgency. She didn't have much time. The candle was growing thinner by the second, its flame wavered, shrinking with each flicker. Then, with a sharp breath, she forced the planchette to slide over the muscles straining against whatever was holding it down. Rattle, rattle. The room shook again, harder this time. Dust spilled from the ceiling, and the scent of mold became even more pronounced. And something was getting closer. Her heart raced as she focused her attention back on the planchette. 2 more letters, 2 more letters. Sweat trickled down the side of her face as she pushed the planchette. The moment she did, the rattling grew even more intense. Rattle. She clenched her teeth and kept pushing, but the more she pushed, the stronger the resisting force was. Something was coming closer to her. She could feel it. She could. It was just as she was about to reach the eye that she felt something cold press over her hand as her entire body froze. Slowly turning her head, she saw Joanna standing next to her. Her face was hollow and her eyes were pitch black. Mia nearly had a heart attack. How in the world did she get here? No, it made sense. The squad leader was probably busy dealing with Min. Let go. Mia tried to push the planchette, but Joanna's cold hand prevented her from moving at all. The room trembled further as the candle next to her dimmed even further. She could feel the temperature starting to plummet, alongside the light in the room. She could also feel the presence of something sinister slowly starting to seep into the room. No, no, no. Mia's mind raced, and the node in her mind activated. Let go. She spoke once more, and instantly, Joanna was pushed back several steps. She was of the sonorous decree, and her skill enabled her node to allow her to put power into her voice. Now, Mia took advantage of the opportunity to move the planchette over the eye. The moment she did, it was as if everything paused. The rattling, the surrounding noise. Everything. Mia felt the eyes of everyone in the room slowly turn towards her, and her heart skipped a beat. The wax slowly fell down from the candle, and the surrounding breath seemed to pause in unison as the surroundings turned still. The pause lasted for only a brief second, before Mia immediately moved the planchette towards the last letter. Rattle. Everything appeared to set in motion from that moment forward. The room trembled with more ferocity, the table moving side to side as the table nearly toppled over. Mia's expression changed as she kept the board in place while the candle spilled over. The flames flickered with their last dying ambers as she felt a pair of hands latch onto her from behind, crawling over her skin. Thump-a-thump. The heavy sound of steps echoed from behind her shortly after that as her heart sank. Those heavy steps. They were certainly Min's. She kept pushing the planchette, but everything was working against her. No. Mia grew desperate, and in that moment of desperation, a hand reached out from behind her and pushed the planchette forward, towards the N. When it finally landed there, everything stopped. Min, Joanna, and the rattling. Everything stopped. Then, puff, several items appeared from out of thin air, landing on the hands of everyone present as the room started to distort. The cobblestone faded, and in its place, a familiar grey carpet appeared. A white light flickered above, and all too familiar cubicles appeared. In just several seconds, everything faded, and the all too familiar setting appeared. Thud! Mia fell on the carpet as her hair stuck to her face. Her face was pale, and thinking about the entire situation, she couldn't help but look towards the squad leader, who looked around with a calm yet dead expression. She opened her mouth but soon closed it. Was that really an F-ranked gate? That was way closer than I wanted it to be. I could practically feel my entire back drenched in sweat. The entire sequence of events turned out to be a lot more unpredictable than I had originally anticipated. While I did manage to hold Min back, I didn't expect Joanna's sudden appearance. Her appearance made the entire thing more difficult. Thankfully, Mia was able to persist. However, in the end, I still had no choice but to dash to her in order to give the planchette the last push that it needed. Lowering my head, I stared at the fragments in my hand. There were 3 in total. Just from one look, I could tell that they were quite pure. However, now was not the time for me to look at them, as I turned my attention towards the other members of the team. Their faces were all pale, with some even struggling to stay steady. I looked at everyone present before shaking my head. There were a lot of things that I wanted to say, but I decided to keep them to myself. I could just tell that everyone in the room understood what went wrong. I didn't plan on making their lives harder. Go get some rest. I'll report to the team leader our findings. In the meantime, you can hand all of your fragments to me. I'll deliver them to her. I went to my desk and grabbed a bag. However, the moment I walked towards the others with the bag open, I saw hesitation in their eyes. It was almost as if they were scared of giving them to me. What's going on? But this didn't last long, as Joanna was the first one to move towards me as she dropped her fragments in the bag. Mia and the others followed right after that. In the end, only one person remained. Neil. He looked at the fragments in my hand and then at me, his expression complex. In the end, clenching his teeth, he followed what the others did and placed them in the bag. I got 3. I know. I'm glad you do. Neil said before turning to look at the others and then turning around. His actions confused me, but I decided to let it go. I was honestly quite exhausted. However, more than anything, I was excited. The fragments were only supposed to be handed over in order to be checked. However, that didn't mean the guild was going to take them from us. We could either trade them or we could keep them. I planned on keeping mine. Alongside that, the team leader was going to give the clearance grade of the gate. Bonuses would be handed out if the clearing rate was at a high level. I was still not fully aware of how it worked, but the word bonus was enough to get me excited. The only issue was the fact that I was supposed to have the meeting with her over dinner, but how bad could it be? The team leader might be eccentric, but I'm sure she isn't that bad. Clank! Silence fell over the room as the squad leader left the room. All the squad members stood in silence while staring at the door. Each wore a different expression on their faces. In the end, it was Mia who broke the silence. What do you guys think our clearance rate at the gate? Each gate had a clearance rate. The rate was based on the level of the gate, the speed at which it was cleared, how it was cleared, and how the members performed. In their case, they didn't feel that their completion rate was very high. I'm not sure. Joanna shook her head while sitting back on her chair. She had mixed thoughts about the entire situation. But at the same time, slowly raising her head, she looked towards the others. If I had to guess, it won't be very high. Besides the squad leader and Mia, none of us were helpful at all. In fact, you can say that we lowered the clearance rate significantly. There was a short silence after that. None of them could argue with her words. She was right. The squad leader and Mia were indeed the only ones who had actually done something. Actually, hesitating, Mia spoke up. All heads raised towards her. Aim so well, actually. She seemed to struggle for words, and Nora's brow furrowed. Just spit it out, what are you trying to say? I actually didn't do too much. Mia scratched the side of her face. The only thing I did was just move the planchette. The squad leader did all the work. In fact, I almost ambushed him too. What? The faces of everyone present changed. None of them had been there, so they didn't fully understand what had happened. But after a few minutes of listening to Mia's explanation and watching the replay of the dive on the monitors, they all instinctively drew in a sharp breath. Especially when they paused at the part where he noticed something amiss in the room. Something about it felt creepy. Especially the dead look in his eyes as he handled the entire situation from start to finish, like it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience, from the way he left his room without hesitation to confronting the so-called possessed head-on. He looked completely detached from it. Does he really have no powers? Replaying the video over and over again, they had a hard time associating the man in the video with the squad leader of the rumors. Neil's face turned complex as he blankly stared at his own computer. He recalled how it was the very same squad leader who had told him to wait before voting. In the end, he didn't listen, and the entire situation turned out like this. He had really belayed them all out. But that wasn't the most important thing. Staring at each other, everyone understood something. Their squad leader. He was far from incompetent. This should do, right? I looked at myself in the mirror. I wasn't wearing anything fancy, just a plain white shirt and some black pants. I thought about styling my hair, but gave up when I realized that I didn't have anything to style it with. Maybe I should go buy some gel at the store. I do need to buy some chips for Mile. I'd normally not care enough, but since I was going to go to the store regardless, it wouldn't cost me much to purchase it. Okay. I patted my cheeks while staring at my reflection. This is just a work dinner. If she tries to get me to drink, I'll drink just a little bit, but I won't exaggerate. The guild will also foot the bill, but I shouldn't order anything crazy. Just go there, listen to her ramblings, and leave. A plan formulated in my mind as I turned my attention away from the mirror and onto the door. This dinner with the team leader. I was going to survive it. Please just kill me. I thought I'd be ready for anything, from a sudden gate appearance to even a bunch of anomalies coming from out of nowhere to haunt me. When I arrived at the location, I was pleasantly surprised by the place. It looked like a nice modern establishment with nice tables and enclosed rooms. The moment I arrived and I told them my name, they brought me directly to the said room. For a moment, I actually had my hopes up. Maybe this was going to be a pleasant dinner. But that thought only lasted a few seconds. The last thing I expected when I entered the room was a table overflowing with alcohol. Bottles from various brands were scattered around, whiskey, vodka, and all kinds of strong drinks. Sitting behind the mess was the team leader, casually waving at me. "You're here. This alcoholic. Here, try this." Sitting up, the team leader walked up to me and passed me a can of beer. "This is some good stuff." "So she said." I forced a smile and nodded. "Sure." I opened the beer and took one small sip. "I'll make sure to drink this as slowly as possible." I glanced around the room. Apart from the table overflowing with alcohol, several sofas lined the far end, and a large TV hung from the ceiling. I made my way to the nearest sofa and sat down. At the same time, I turned my attention towards the team leader. She wasn't dressed much differently from me, just a plain white shirt tucked neatly into skinny black pants that showed off her figure. The top buttons of her shirt were undone. As she held a beer can, she slouched into the seat beside me and casually draped her hand over my shoulder. I wanted to move away, but my instincts told me not to. She was most definitely the female version of the section chief. "Do you know what's the best thing about this job?" An unexpected question. Turning my head in her direction, I shook my head. Was there anything good about this job? "The pay. FTT." The team leader dismissed me with her hand. "There are many other jobs I could be doing for better pay. I could be a model or an actress. I'd definitely make more." I wanted to argue, but I really couldn't. It really did seem like she could be either with her looks. "The best thing about this job is this moment." The team leader brought her hand up to show the bottle in her hand. It's the moment when your day ends, and you can drink as much as you can, so that you can forget about everything that happened during the day. With a laugh that went along the lines of heh, she brought the beer to her mouth and took a nice, good sip of it. With a hua, she then leaned her head back. "Nothing beats this feeling." She really did seem to be enjoying herself. "But can't you also do this as an actress? I'm sure if you earn more money, you'd be able to buy drinks and forget about everything like now." The team leader paused. She looked at me. I looked at her. The room fell silent for a moment before she pursed her lips and brought the drink closer to her lips. However, from the noticeable shake of her hand, it was clear that she was starting to realize this herself. In the end, she shook her head and put on a serious expression. "This job with all the messed up stuff that we see, it is necessary to forget. Can't say the same for the actress one." She looked really serious as she said those words. I'd have normally believed her if not for the fact that her eyes were dead. She's definitely regretting her life choices. I cleared my throat and tried to say something. However, before I even had the chance to, she beat me to it. "Enough of that." She tossed me a paper on my lap. I looked at the file in front of me and then looked back at her. That's your evaluation score for the recent gate." With an ambiguous smile, she nudged her head. "Open it, it's quite interesting." Open it up. I was rather surprised when I saw the result. Curious, I did just that. I opened up the file, and the first thing that greeted my sight was the massive bee that stood by the side of the paper. I paused for a moment before looking at her. "What, you don't look satisfied?" "No, rather, I'm a bit surprised." Taking everything into consideration, the dive was a mess. A lot of things had changed, and the other members struggled to adapt. There were plenty of mistakes made. I wasn't safe from those mistakes. Although I did end up clearing the gate, there were certainly things that I could have done better. But despite all of that, for the grade to be this high, I couldn't help but be surprised. Surprised. Grabbing a bottle of whiskey, the team leader popped it open and began chugging. I pretended not to notice, waiting for her to finish before she looked back at me and spoke. "There were definitely mistakes. For instance, you should have been firmer with your team about your hunch, and you could have carried the board with you, among other things. But that doesn't change the fact that you still cleared the gate." The team leader tapped on the file and looked at me directly. Need I even have to mention the fact that the gate was of a higher rank than it was supposed to be? "What?" I pretended to be shocked here. I was well aware of the fact. In fact, I had been wondering whether they'd noticed this fact or not. In the end, it really did seem like they noticed it. Yes. The team leader tapped the file a few more times, leaning toward me as a sweet scent, mingled with strong alcohol, drifted into my nostrils. She leaned her head closer and took another big gulp of the vodka. The gate was meant to be F-ranked but ended up as E. We got the report just after you returned. I sent a few people to investigate the situation. Thankfully, it was a lower-ranked gate, and taking into consideration the recruits inside, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. While rare, this isn't unheard of. The good news is you all came back and secured some valuable fragments. The percentages for each fragment have been confirmed. Want to hear yours? Before I could say anything, she pointed towards the bottom of the file, where I saw my name alongside several percentages. 92%, 51%, and 67%. I sucked in a cold breath. That's not bad, eh? The team leader nudged my shoulder with her elbow as she propped her head over my shoulder to get a better look at the file. I wanted to push her away, but held back. I didn't want to provoke a soon-to-be drunk lunatic. Her soft voice lazily whispered into my ear. Say, do you want to sell the fragments to me? Well, I don't actually need them, but I can probably flip them for good pro. The team leader paused before coughing. They'll make for good decoration. Yes, that. Her head slowly turned away from me as she tried to whistle, but that was probably the worst attempt at a whistle that I had ever seen. Nonetheless, there was something that caught my interest. If you're planning on flipping the fragments, where do you do it? Ace flipping, Warat. She was most definitely already starting to get drunk. However, I persisted. Do you do it at a guild or somewhere else? Somewhere like a black? Tutut. The team leader suddenly covered my mouth with her hand as she leaned her head closer to me and smiled. There are things that we can and we can't talk about. That is one of them. So you know. I wonder. She smiled ambiguously. However, that smile was all that I needed to see. I've been looking for a black market for so long. I finally have some sort of lead. However, it doesn't look like the team leader will share so easily. In fact, it didn't seem like she planned on sharing at all. I didn't know why. Was the black market that much of a taboo topic? I was quite desperate to get my hands on fragments. So far, I had about 18. I needed 2 more in order to reach the 3rd order. However, of the 18 that I had, 15 were of low purity. In the end, the only thing I did with them was remove their attributes. I had yet to use the fax machine to increase their purity. I planned on buying more fragments in order to guarantee at least 20 fragments with a purity higher than 60%. And for that to happen, I needed to go to the black market. But how was I going to get the information out of her? How was I? Heck! I suddenly froze, watching the team leader pull her head back as she took another swig of whiskey. My gaze shifted between the bottle and her. Wait a minute. A thought struck me as I glanced at the many drinks on the table and reached for one with a relatively high alcohol content. Team leader. Oh. I opened up the bottle and poured it into a small cup while offering it to her. Please have this to drink, team leader. Take this as a token of respect from me. Ho-ho. The team leader looked at me and then at the small cup in my hand. It looks like you're finally coming to your senses. She looked quite happy, flattered even. Taking the cup, she downed it in one go. Huak aim. The moment the team leader downed the drink, her eyes turned bloodshot, and she barely managed to stop herself from gagging. She snapped her head toward the bottle in my hand, eyes wide as she mumbled, 95%. This little fucker, is he trying to get me drunk? Yes, I was. I pretended not to hear her, fixing her with the most innocent expression I could manage. Is something wrong, team leader? Did you not like my token? Token? The malice that had clouded her features softened briefly when she saw my innocent expression, only to return moments later as she grabbed the same drink and poured a cup for me. Here, a token from me. Oh, I don't Huke. She shoved the drink at me before I could react. Instantly, a fierce burn seared the back of my throat, and my eyes nearly rolled back from the shock. Cough. By the time I recovered, the team leader was cackling to herself, clutching a bottle in one hand. Holding onto my neck, I looked around and grabbed another drink before giving it to her. I'm sorry about earlier, team leader. It was an honest mistake. Here's some water for you. Water? She looked at the transparent liquid in my hand and then at me. She nodded a couple of times. Looks like you've got some good sense in yo, Huiak. She nearly choked on the drink. Pukes, you animal. Kakaka. It was my turn to laugh. Fucking idiot. That wasn't water. Oh crap, Tilda, I must have mistaken the bot. You treacherous little bastard, here, drink up. I felt something get shoved into my mouth right after that. Huake. Kakakakaka. Arg, team leader, there's this new drink that's quite interesting. Want to try it? No, Ice Huey. I couldn't quite remember what happened after that. Everything just blacked out from that moment forward. By the time I recovered, I felt a splitting headache as I opened my eyes to feel something soft at the back of my head. A pillow. I massaged my face before helping myself up. How much time had passed? My head. With another groan, I blinked slowly and looked around me. It seemed like the same spot from yesterday. Wait, what? I hastily looked back to see the team leader passed out behind me, her hands sprawled all over as her chest heaved up slowly. I stared at the scene in shock before checking the time. 8:33 a.m. Fuck. I had spent the night here. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story.